If I feel like you're not actually getting it, then I'll just jump in really quickly. We want to save as much time for Q&A as we possibly can, just because the subject matter is so huge and so salient as to where we are right now. So with that said, Mr.
It is
Chair, are
live
you
now,
ready?
Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, so you're good to go.
Okay, we're ready?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me just start us off here. First of all, thank you once again for joining the Environment and Transportation Committee. Today's topic is the transportation part of environment and transportation, and we're very happy to have Ben Grumbles here and Chrissy Nizer and Kevin Quinn and so many other people in government and in industry to really discuss all the facets of where we're going as a state and as a nation by extension, I suppose. And so I'm just going to conclude there and pass it over to Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo, who is the chair of the Transportation Subcommittee in our greater committee. Take it away, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for allowing us to get this, to put this on, because it's a huge subject matter. So I would like to welcome everybody here, all the presenters that are here today, as well as all of our folks that are on YouTube watching, to the environment, transportation, the future of transportation in Maryland. As we all know, transportation is changing very, very quickly, and here's a great opportunity to see what's coming and why, not only from an environmental perspective, which is so very important, but from every perspective when it comes to transportation. So we have a great lineup of folks today. I want to thank all of our speakers so much. And I want to thank Trish and Molly so much for helping to put all of this together on the back end. And with that said, our first speaker is the wonderful Secretary Ben Grumbles from the Department of Environment. Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Barve. Thank you, committee, for your leadership on environment and transportation and bringing people together to make real progress. The key to clean air and climate progress is the transportation sector. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Maryland at just over 40% of the statewide total. In 2017, on-road vehicles in Maryland produced approximately 28.5 million metric tons of CO2. Approximately 31% of those tons came from light-duty cars, 47% from light-duty trucks, 20% from medium and heavy-duty trucks, 2% from buses, and a fraction of a percent from motorcycles. So just looking at those numbers, when you look at light-duty trucks and light-duty vehicles, that really adds up to enormous opportunities, not only for reducing greenhouse gas emissions as we accelerate towards zero emissions, but also healthier lungs, improved air quality when you take into account smog and particle pollution, very dangerous pollutants that are one of Maryland's biggest challenges. I want to mention some of the work that we're doing to provide you and your colleagues on the committee context for further action. The Volkswagen settlement led to significant improvements in investments throughout Maryland, like other states, in reducing diesel emissions. The Volkswagen settlement focused on heavy-duty diesel vehicle replacement. $64 million of our settlement went towards that to offset NOx emissions caused by the Volkswagen defeat device vehicles. We've achieved, Maryland Department of the Environment has achieved over 3,100 tons of NOx reductions lifetime, far surpassing our goal. We also included working closely with Department of Transportation and Maryland Energy Administration, a structure for funding not just emissions reductions from diesel trucks and other cars, but also the light duty vehicle, electric vehicle infrastructure program. Volkswagen, our work plan that we've worked to implement has several features. And I know you, Mr. Chairman, are very, very engaged and supportive of efforts to electrify school buses. So we included over $2 million for school bus electrification, but they're also a key component of our greenhouse gas reduction strategy, as well as funding through the Volkswagen settlement is transit buses, as well as trash haulers and shuttle buses. You will hear more from Chrissy Neiser about some of the work we're doing for cars and my outstanding colleagues in the Maryland Department of Transportation. But the Clean Car Low Emission Vehicle Program is very important to us. Maryland is one of 14 states, along with the District of Columbia, that's adopted the more stringent standards, and is one of 11 states that have adopted the zero emission vehicle mandate. I can't overemphasize the importance of using the tools through the Federal Clean Air Act and the State Healthy Air Act to continue to strive towards cleaner and low and zero emission cars, trucks, and buses. Our own state fleet in Maryland, the state agencies, DGS, DBM, MDOT, MEA, and MDE are working together to develop a strategy to replace eligible state vehicles with plug-in vehicles over the next 10 years. And that will lead to the replacement of approximately 2,000 vehicles over the next several years. I'm very enthused about the work that's happening at the local level and in the counties as well to replace combustion engine vehicles with plug-in and zero emission vehicles. Our goals, you and your colleagues are very familiar with the very ambitious goals we have in our state for light and also now medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles through MOUs. The MOU on light duty vehicles, as you know, sets a sales goal for the state of Maryland of 300,000 light duty plug-in vehicles in the state by 2025. That's extremely ambitious. As you know, we've got a little over 25,000, so we have a long ways to go, but we're going to keep pushing and working on game changers with utilities and local and state officials and the private sector to make real progress on that 300,000 light duty plug-in vehicle goal. The other one that folks may not be as familiar with, but they should be, in July, Governor Hogan signed an MOU with 14 other states in the District of Columbia on medium and heavy duty diesel vehicles to get to zero emission. Incredibly ambitious, incredibly important. 30% of all medium and heavy duty vehicle sales by 2030. That's the goal, is to get those to be electric and zero emission, with an even more audacious goal of getting to zero emission for medium and heavy duty vehicles. We're talking about the trucks, the trucks and buses by 2050. Our MDOT and MDE and MEA are working on our state strategy on that front and partnering through NESCOM and Northeast states to make real progress on that front. The other key, Mr. Chairman, is recognizing that while we focus on environmental regulation and technology innovation and infrastructure partnerships at the state level, we must remain vigilant and continue to be very active in defending our programs at the federal level. And so over the last 4 years, MDE and the Office of the Attorney General, with the governor's full support, have fought vigorously against the rollbacks of the Clean Air Act at the federal level. So the SAFE rule, the so-called SAFE rule that the Trump administration put in place, we're very focused on and participating in litigation to block those from being put in place. This is the so-called California waiver. That was one part of the Trump administration SAFE rule. We're fighting on that front because that rule attempts to revoke the California waiver basically blocking California and the other states, the other 14 states, including Maryland, from having stronger, more stringent tailpipe emissions controls. So we're fighting that. And I'm very optimistic on that front for a lot of reasons. And also the rule had rolled back the greenhouse gas emission standards for model years 2021 through 2025 and finalizes new standards for the model year 2026. By EPA's own estimates, these rollbacks are projected to increase carbon emissions so much by 2025 that would be equivalent to putting more than 9 million vehicles on the road. So we're vigorously fighting that, working closely with the Attorney General's office and the Attorney General's offices of the other states under the Clean Air Act Section 177 program. And to conclude, Mr. Chairman, all of this just emphasizes that as our state and as the Hogan administration continue to make real progress in reducing emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, NOx emissions, smog emissions from smokestacks, we're focusing even more on the tailpipes of not just cars, but trucks and buses, and not just through state regulations, but through regional partnerships and technology innovations, working closely with the private sector. And your continued support for electrification and for zero emission vehicles is greatly appreciated, not just by the department, but by the lungs of every Marylander and by those who cherish the Chesapeake Bay. Because as you know, it's not just what comes from the land and out of sewage treatment plants or factories, it's what goes up into the air and travels many miles. That those NOx emissions and nitrogen pollution are a significant threat to the Chesapeake Bay. So the Hogan administration has been working closely through partnerships like ozone control, which focus on a lot of aspects of the transport of smog. And again, just to conclude where I started, the transportation sector is critically important in this, in building partnerships and making continued environmental progress. I'm very proud of the work we're doing with Department of Transportation. Earl Lewis, the Deputy Secretary under Greg Slater, chairs the ZVIC Council on Zero Emission Vehicles. That's a very important and innovative partnership that I think will be key in working with your committee to make real progress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to any questions or clarifications that committee members might have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Secretary Grumbles. Our first question, I think, is Delegate Ruth.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Grumbles, Secretary Grumbles, for being here and for all your work in, reducing emissions and, moving us towards a lower emission future. The electrification and reducing vehicle emissions is so crucial, but even electric vehicles come with an environmental impact when you look at things like lithium, which has to be mined, and that mining has an environmental impact, and in the long term may not even be sustainable. So are we looking in the long term, at moving past the electric vehicles' reliance on lithium, or how we can address that sustainability for long term?
Yes, we are, Delegate, and that's exactly the type of question people need to be asking for sustainable materials management to support cleaner vehicles, zero emissions. So we are looking at that. We've met with a few companies that also are looking to find innovative ways to recycle and reuse the lithium-ion batteries. But looking to alternatives, the Energy Administration, the Department of Transportation in particular are looking at the partnerships on that front. It's always important to identify potential bottlenecks or speed bumps or weak links in the process. And I think you've hit on one of those, is we've got to figure out ways for national security purposes and also environmental sustainability, look beyond the lithium-ion batteries to other strategies. We are, and also with the business perspective, looking at nor are there companies that might have alternatives that would be interested in locating in Maryland, since we are putting a real emphasis on clean transportation. And ion batteries actually finding environmentally sustainable alternatives is key. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Secretary Grumbles, if you could just hang on for a little bit longer. I know we have
Sure.
Chrissy Neiser is going to speak next, and then I think it's a really good time to clean up on
Great.
any questions, because it's going to throw a pretty big net. So Administrator Neiser from the Maryland Department of Transportation, thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see you again and to really get deep into the subject matter, because I know we've been dealing with the zero emission vehicle mandate and the MOU for years in the committee and in the subcommittee. But I think this is a great opportunity for the committee and the subcommittee to really dive deep into really understanding the emphasis of this issue. And so please, you're on. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you organizing this, as well as the chairman and your leadership, certainly in this area. And thank you to Secretary Grumbles, who is a great partner, along with his teammates at MDE as well as MEA. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation. Can you see that?
Yes, you can.
Oh. Sorry about that. I think it just went away. Hold on a second. All right, is that good?
Yep, looks great.
Great,
Thank
sorry
you.
about that. Okay, so I want to start off and provide a little bit of that context that Delegate Fraser Hidalgo was talking about. So obviously it starts back in 2007 when the Maryland legislature adopted the California emission standards, and those obviously were effective in model year 2011 and newer. Also, it was the same year that Maryland Commission on Climate Change was established, and so certainly a banner year. But I think this chart is important because it shows the continued progress that was made over time, from the fact that Maryland first joined the 7 other states, which have now grown, to signing that ZEV MOU, and really establishing action plans. You see 2014 was a big year for that, as well as the 2018 recent action on the MOU. And so I think this chart is important in showing the progress that has happened over time, and the continued move forward to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect the environment. I want to talk a little bit about the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council, as referenced by Secretary Grumbles, that was established again by the legislature in 2011. It's great in that it has diverse representation, not only state agencies, but our utilities, private entities, ZBIC advocates, and public representation. In 2019, the function scope was added for fuel cell electric vehicles, and so now you'll hear it called ZBIC. I will say that it's really an effort that's been regionally recognized, and I think the approach, really the collaborative approach, is a great step for the state. Shows that we're all working together for the same goal and to reach the accomplishments that are important to all of us. And that is chaired by our Deputy Secretary Earl Lewis, who's a strong advocate in that regard. So you can see on the right-hand side of this chart, there are priorities that the group establishes. You can see what those are for the coming year. Includes from education and outreach, diversity and equity, to continue to promote those ZEV infrastructure incentives for light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles. Also wanted to show the alternative fuel corridors and signage. Obviously, that designation process is something that MDOT leads with the Federal Highway Administration. And so, you know, the fact that there are 21 electric vehicle charging corridors from urban areas to suburban areas and more rural as well. We know that there is anxiety for folks when they are potentially purchasing a vehicle to make sure that they have good access to charging stations and they have good access to making sure they get where they need to be. And so whether it's the signage, whether it's the route designation, all of these things are important from an infrastructure standpoint to make sure that folks feel comfortable that they have the sources that they need to get that electric vehicle. We're also working very closely with the Public Service Commission in terms of charging stations and the ability for the utilities to be able to move forward in that regard. So again, that we make sure that we've got the capacity that's needed for those owners of the electric vehicles. Wanted to show the registration, and those numbers were referenced earlier. These are the most up-to-date numbers. So you can see we're up to 28,575. So the number has grown a little bit over the last several months. We certainly cherish every additional vehicle that's registered, and so I'm glad to see that. Certainly we do have a ways to go, and we recognize that in terms of the goal that the Secretary identified in terms of 2025 with 300,000 vehicles. But we do believe that we continue forward progress, not only as a state and the policies the state are adopting, but I think we hear from some of the manufacturers later on in terms of the additional types of vehicles that will be out in the marketplace. And you know how technology has just really continued to move forward in that regard. One of the things that I know has been a topic of conversation in the past for this committee is the tax credit program. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview to what that looks like. It has been in various forms throughout the year. Legislature has adopted different limits and those kind of things, size of battery at one point, different ways of doing that. I will say last year with the session, the unusual session, obviously we had the legislation was not reauthorized. So currently we do not have a tax credit program, but I did think it was important to show the committee the number of vehicles that have been helped in prior years by that credit. So you can see that documented on this slide as well. I want to talk a little bit about connected and automated vehicles, and you may say, why are we transitioning that topic? And really it is because those vehicles are in most cases electric vehicles. And so, great question earlier in terms of technology and how is technology developing. Really, the future we believe of transportation is these connected and automated vehicles. And Maryland's really been a leader in that regard, establishing a vision for safe, efficient, and equitable transportation through connected and automated vehicles, with safety obviously always in the forefront. We have a working group that was formed back in 2015. Again, you'll see it's very similar to what was done with ZVIC, in that we've got a multidisciplinary approach, whether it's private sector, state, local government, all working together to really take a look at this emerging area. We've been fortunate with the academia and the research and infrastructure folks we have in Maryland, and we've been certainly taking advantage of their expertise and their input. We actually had a meeting yesterday, and I think we had as many as 170 people on that call. So great to see the interest. A lot of subgroups that are meeting, whether it's looking at issues related to law enforcement, whether it's looking at those technical issues, making sure the technology is safe. I'll talk a little bit about the permitting process we have in Maryland, as well as freight. And I know you'll hear from Louis Campion earlier. That's an important part of where this is going. It is good timing. We just released our strategic plan yesterday, and so you're kind of hearing the first of what that looks like. We wanted essentially a call to action in terms of this area that really aligns all the plans together for the state of Maryland. This is not a Department of Transportation plan. This really is a state of Maryland plan to help coordinate for CAV throughout the state, as well as our coordination that's happening at the federal level and with other state partners. So the framework at a glance, and you'll hear many of these consistent priorities, public education and outreach, similar to what ZVIC is doing, right? These are important areas to be educating the public on. Planning and policy, early deployment and testing, infrastructure, and then workforce development. So we want to increase the transparency of CAV. We know there is a general distrust of the technology and where it's going, and so that's really critical. We want to ensure there's diverse audience when we're communicating initiatives and we're getting the message out universally. And we want to leverage existing outreach avenues. Planning and policy, obviously the CA working group provides that central point of focus. It establishes the goals and metrics, but that group is also looking at what are the barriers and how can we move forward. Cross collaboration and open data sharing are pivotal issues that we're looking at. Also making sure the data is safeguarded, right? There's a lot of data that comes from connected and automated vehicles. How are we going to keep that data safe and make sure it's not getting into the wrong hands? Making sure manufacturers and folks in the private sector feel comfortable sharing the data with the state, which is very important to us from an infrastructure standpoint. So all of those are really key policy issues. Early deployment and testing, and I'll go through a few of the pilots that we're already doing here in Maryland. We want to continue to grow that. We want to look at freight opportunities. We want to leverage our academic partners throughout the state and establish non-traditional research partners as well. Infrastructure obviously is critical in everything we do. So what is required? What infrastructure is required for these vehicles? How do we build out that communication infrastructure? You know, these are smart cars essentially, and we need to make sure we've got the capability in our infrastructure to be able to handle that. Asset management obviously is key, and not only is it traditional asset management, but also software configuration. Workforce, and this is something we've been working on. How do we make sure not only the state workforce is prepared, but also the local and private sector? These are major changes. I know Kevin Quinn will talk about even for MTA, some of the changes they're making to their workforce related to electric vehicles. We really need to make sure the workforce is prepared and evolves to be able to support the technology that's coming. And so it really is about how we can continue to move forward and to promote the technology in Maryland. Here's some of the partners we're working with at the federal level, lots of acronyms here, but I just want to let you know that we are trying to pull from the best and brightest, don't reinvent the wheel, and make sure in this evolving area we're at the forefront of the conversation. So here's a chart that talks about some of the CAV activity, again, from the formation in 2015 to some of the early pilots that we started, as well as where we are today and releasing that strategic framework and really participating in some of the national efforts that are happening related to CAV. I do want to point out we were the first state in a pilot program by NHTSA that is an online platform for sharing A/B testing activities and other safety information. I had mentioned transparency, and this is a key point that to have that information out publicly that anybody can go on the website and take a look at, we felt like was really important, and that's why we supported the effort. We're excited to continue to grow that. You can go out now. You can see I've got that link for you there if you want to go out and look at what's happening in Maryland. You can see all the testing locations. Maryland is certainly open for CAV testing. We've got a website that shows this is something that was asked by the private sector to show locations they potentially could test. So we've got a map that's interactive that they can go to and take a look at where they might want to test depending on what conditions they need. We've also established an expression of interest that allows folks to say they want to collaborate with us. It's right online. They send us information. Sometimes they want to test, sometimes they just want to have a conversation. And then we've got a highly automated vehicle permit, which is required for anybody to test on a public roadway. It does have insurance requirements. Obviously, they have to self-certify the vehicle's safety. And then we do, after a full review by our technical committee, offer a unique permit for each vehicle. That permit is visible by law enforcement. That was something that was identified for us as really critical. Again, this process is something that's been looked at as a model throughout the country. So here's some of the two pilots that are currently going on. Hopefully you've heard of these companies before, but Local Motors did a pilot at National Harbor, but they're also testing in Montgomery County with robotics research, both really good efforts. Again, the National Harbor got to expose some of the general public to this, and that kind of shuttle, low speed, last mile solution application. Steer is another really interesting company, woman owned, from Howard County, got some seed startup money and really done great work in terms of autonomous parking. They are working with MTA as well as BWI and what that looks like to make a better experience for the customer. So here you see two really interesting, I think, models of what that connected and automated vehicle technology could do to help us moving forward. One thing I wanted to touch on is low speed vehicles, and that's something that this committee's been interested in. You've gotten a lot of bills in this regard. We have adopted regulations within the last few years that enable us to regulate those low speed vehicles that are overweight. Haverty Grace was the most recent one you probably remember. And so we have now a process in place through regulations. I'd be happy to talk about more, but wanted to let you know that did move forward over the interim. And so there are a lot of local jurisdictions that are doing things. I just wanted to include that to give some of the locals credit for the great work they're doing. And we are working in close partnership with them. So it's not only efforts at the statewide level, it also is really those local efforts that are going on too. Want to hit really quickly on truck platooning. That was legislation that we introduced last year. Unfortunately, again, as that unusual session, we didn't get it fully through the Senate. It did pass. I think 145 to 1 in the House. We are going to be coming back with that legislation. We do think truck platooning and that connected vehicle technology is not only a huge efficiency gain, in terms of fuel usage, but it also creates a lot of safety issues that are helpful as well. What we'd be proposing is lifting that following too closely for trucks who are traveling in an electronically connected platoon. But we do have restrictions on those that we would adopt by regulation. Many other jurisdictions have adopted similar principles. And we think with the I-95 corridor and 83 that Maryland, there's a lot of interest in doing truck platooning in Maryland. We think it would be a great location to continue to move forward by using this innovative technology. So I know I went really quickly through the presentation. There's a lot of information in this area. We could probably talk for hours, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, great. So just a couple of quick questions that I have. One for Secretary Grumbles, and then a couple for you, Administrator Neiser, and I'll see if we have some other questions. Secretary Grumbles, when you were talking about actually, can we go back? There we go. Thank you. When you were talking about the California standards and the administration's kind of attack on them being able to set their own standards, of which we share a lot of them, what do you foresee happening with the new administration coming in? Is that going to change dramatically, or do you have any? I know there was an attack on a similar program back in, I think, like 04 or 05. Can you speak? I know you're not the Secretary of State, but can you speak a little bit about it with the Attorney General?
Right, sure. And I don't have a all-knowing crystal ball either, but it's pretty safe to say that the incoming administration, based on my conversations with the transition team, is very focused on reversing course, which will also have a substantial impact on the litigation right now. Withdrawing going through the process of withdrawing the prior rule is probably where they're going to be focused on, and and that's good news for California and the 14 other states like Maryland who felt under assault on the Clean Air Act. I also know that there's going to be a continued emphasis, not just at the federal level, but in the states. Maryland is a leader in the Ozone Transport Commission with 12 other states, and we're very focused on looking into potential tampering of trucks to remove some of the control devices, not unlike the Volkswagen defeat devices, right. But there's some tampering, evidence of tampering that has occurred in states, and we're looking closely at that level. And the focus, I think, on the administration at the federal level is going to be work with those states that are that have in place and have had in place for years stronger controls, and make sure that the federal government is not undermining those controls on greenhouse gas emissions from tailpipes or CAFE standards. So I think that's good news to look forward to in the coming years, and to ensure that the Clean Air Act provisions are not undermined at the federal level.
Great, thank you. And for Administrator Nizer, thank you so much for the update. It seems like a lot of what we talked about preparing for this meeting was the kind of transition to electric vehicles. And then we ended up getting into a lot of really juicy stuff on CAV. So for those that that have more questions about continuously automated vehicles, I guess a couple of questions. Can you discern the difference between an automated vehicle and let's say a driverless vehicle? I've been getting some questions about that. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that? And then also on a follow-up to that, with the additional data that's going to be needed for these automated vehicles, is 5G important?
Great questions. Thank you for both of those. And I probably should have gone through the SAE level of automation. SAE establishes industry-wide standards in terms of various levels, and that goes from driver-assisted technology, things that you might even have on vehicles today in terms of preventing you from moving
Lane keep
through
assist.
your lane assist. Thank you very much. And other features like that are great safety features on vehicles today, all the way up to 5, which is the fully automated. We don't have any examples of that fully automated solution. It is a ladder, it is a progression through that. And certainly different manufacturers or different stages of working through that. And certainly I can provide that for the committee as background information that might be helpful, certainly to have. But yeah, I mean, it is and then the connected vehicle technology, as you referenced, and 5G is a critical issue. So Maryland has been on record numerous times that we need to save that what's called the public safety spectrum for this critical technology use, this critical infrastructure use. There was a recent decision by the FCC in November that does cause some concern because it would allow some private technology to now be in that lower level of that spectrum. And we are carefully watching that to see how it develops. Obviously, with the new administration coming in, potential changes and FCC commissioners, there might be a change in the policy position, but certainly Maryland has been on record that we need that spectrum to be able to communicate, as you said, the technology that is out there. We need that space in order to be able to share the information. Otherwise, we won't be able to enjoy the many benefits that come with the technology.
Great. And the last question that I kind of had is a pretty broad one, so it's but I know folks have been asking, and that is when we talk about level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all the way up to fully autonomous. Can you? I know it's a little bit of a crystal ball I'm asking you for, but people are asking. So, crystal ball, best you can. What are we looking at as level 4 and 5 as far as a timeline is concerned, and is there a relationship with the feds that we are working with? Can you speak a little bit about those two?
Sure. I mean, there certainly are a lot of estimates out there in terms of what that year necessarily is. I mean, I tend to think that these solutions, the last mile solution, where you see a lot of development and a lot of deployment in the marketplace, might be the first place that you tend to see more deployment. I think what we tend to say is it's going to be a lot of mixed use for a while, a lot of vehicles that have automated features in traffic with vehicles that don't have the automated features. And so that's something we think a lot about. In terms of a time when we've got these all fully automated vehicles in the roadway, I think that's many years to come, but I don't think it's many years until there are more of these technology solutions in the roadway. So right now we're talking about testing. You're talking about deployment, right? And that means that folks are out there purchasing these vehicles from dealerships and manufacturers. And that's why we're including them in the conversation with the CAV. As you said, I don't know that I have a magic ball, but I think the first thing to develop is going to be these last mile solution kind of technology. And we've talked about these personal devices that are out there as well that are moving forward. I think then you'll see more of that shared vehicle use. And then probably lastly, the private ownership model for these vehicles. So that's how it appears to be developing, but technology is moving quickly, so it could change very fast.
Right, so the rollout will happen probably fairly quickly over the next few years, but as far as the entire public fleet of vehicles, that's probably 15 or 20 or even 20.
Exactly,
So.
at least I would guess. If you
Any-
think about the traditional time it takes just to turn over a normal vehicle, right? 7 to 9
Right.
years.
Right. Any other questions for the Secretary or Administrator Nizer on any of these issues? Otherwise, we're going to let them go. No. Thank you both so much for this very informative presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you virtually again in
Thank you.
less than 30 days.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, next we are going to hear, so we heard about overall policy that the state is moving forward in. It's the policy work that we are all doing. And then now we are going to start to get into a little bit of what the manufacturers are doing, just to kind of give us a preview on what their timelines are and what tech they have. So we'll go through all the manufacturers and then we'll go through some Q&A after that, since all of them have their differences as far as their approach to autonomy and electrification and structure. So with that, the Mobility Climate Change Policy Lead for General Motors, Thomas Danique. Thomas, you are up. You got 5 minutes. Thank you so much for making the time to come here and present what General Motors is up to. We appreciate it.
Sure. Well, thank you, and thanks to the committee for inviting General Motors to participate and giving us a chance to be here this morning. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a few slides that I'll run through here so we can follow along together. Like you mentioned, I'm a policy lead for mobility and climate change at General Motors, and in that role have responsibility for our policy considerations with respect to GHG emissions reductions and sort of urban mobility issues. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. Tell me if you have any issues with that, and we can adjust as needed.
You're good.
So just as background and context here, but I think many of you have heard this before, GM is in the midst of a major business and cultural transformation, with Mary Barra having set out this vision for the company 4 or 5 years ago now of helping to build a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And EVs and AVs are absolutely crucial to achieving that vision. GM is committed to an all-electric future in its vehicle portfolio. And you can see here in this quote from Mary Barra that we think GM has what it takes to put everybody in an EV as we move forward. Thought I'd share a little bit about some recent product announcements for you all. I think many of these have been widely publicized, but nonetheless, maybe still useful to get a chance to see here. Our sort of all-electric journey really began with the Chevy Bolt EV, which made Chevy the #2 best-selling EV brand of all time in the United States. This is the first sort of EV for everyone, a long-range BEV at a price that's a bit more attainable for the mass market. The current version has 259 miles of range, but we've got a refreshed version coming out very soon here next year. Look for the launch of that in the new year. And that will be the first non-Cadillac vehicle to feature Super Cruise, which is one of these sort of highly capable semi-autonomous technologies that we're beginning to roll out into the consumer fleet. The Cadillac Lyriq is the first all-electric entry into the Cadillac brand, and it's really sort of the flagship vehicle for GM's pivot to this all-electric future. This is a vehicle that we think has tremendous capability that's going to meet the needs of a much larger cross-section of the driving public. Long range, fast charging times, supervised remote parking, again, this theme of feathering in some advanced, highly autonomous capabilities into the retail fleet. And again, stunning design that we think is going to appeal to a wider section of the market. Most recently, you may have seen the announcement of the GMC Hummer EV. This is a Detroit-built all-electric so-called super truck. Again, the idea being here that we're trying to broaden the appeal of EVs across the portfolio and have an entry that meets people's needs, wants, and desires in every segment at every price point. The Hummer working to tackle a higher end consumer that's interested in super capable vehicles with a number of unique features. And we'll see initial availability of this on lots starting late next year. On the AV front, GM's strategy is really focused on shared use urban mobility applications, with the first principle being that all AVs should be EVs. What you see here is the Cruise Origin. This is the the so-called SAV, the shared autonomous vehicle that GM will build here in Detroit for deployment through our subsidiary Cruise and shared use urban applications, where we're already testing a modified Bolt EV that's now on road in California and driverless applications. But the Cruise will be absent driver controls, nothing like a conventional car, fire pit seating, they call it. People can look at each other inside the vehicle. And this is sort of the way that GM imagines AVs can be deployed first for public use. Ultimately, GM's doing all this in service of achieving mass market EV adoption. And we think there are four sort of key ingredients to achieving that vision. And the first two are really about the supply side of the question. What are the vehicles? How much do they cost? What do they achieve? And I think you'll see here from what I've shown that GM's trying to answer that in its product offering. But the other two pieces to this are ubiquitous charging infrastructure and supportive policies. And GM's trying to tackle both of those. First, with partnerships with charging providers like EVgo, who are helping to triple the size of its public DCFC installations around the country. And the importance of that is showing consumers that the chargers are out there. They're out there ahead of the need and the demands. People feel comfortable buying those cars and addressing range anxiety. They know they can get where they want to go with their BEV. And on the policy front, GM continues to advocate for policies that accelerate EV adoption. And the great news is that Maryland is actually a leader in a lot of this through improving EV affordability with your consumer purchase incentive, recognizing that funding's been constrained lately, but the point is that was a simple, reliable, compelling incentive, and that kind of thing is extremely important in enticing consumers to make that switch from ICE to EV. Avoiding unreasonable, disproportionate, punitive EV registration fees, providing additional ownership perks like HOV lane access privileges, and then considering sort of bigger picture tools that can help juice demand, if you will, for example, through fleet purchase requirements. You might imagine those in the medium and heavy duty sectors on transit buses or particular beachhead segments like airport shuttles or urban delivery vehicles. And then finally, and this is a really exciting option, I think, before Maryland as we speak, is harnessing the power of markets with policies like TCI or a low carbon fuel standard. These can work in concert. They could be alternatives. The point is policies like that help to push the entire market in a better direction and create revenues that can be invested strategically to keep building EV adoption through investments in charging infrastructure, consumer incentives, and so on. So GM continues to advocate for the use of policies like that to continue building the market and accelerating adoption more broadly. I think that brings me to the end of my time. I'll thank you again for inviting Jim to participate. Happy to answer questions. Thanks so much for listening.
So thank you so much, General Motors, for being here, and thank you for your presentation. Really exciting what's coming about. So we'll hold for questions again toward the end. And next we have Zach Khan from Tesla. So Zach, take it away.
All right. Let's see if my video will turn on. I don't know. Oh, I apologize. My video does not seem to want to turn on. I don't know if you guys have controls over there, but it maybe I'm having some internet issues. So I apologize. You're not missing much, but I will open up I will share my document with you. Hold on. All right. Okay. You guys see everything?
We do.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, for having me. Really have enjoyed this discussion so far and look forward to talking to you all about Tesla and what we are offering in the market in Maryland and our plans for the future and engaging in a discussion. So Tesla is a mission-driven company, and our mission is pretty simple. We want to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, and we do so through our variety of products. So in this slide, you see, today I'm going to focus mostly on the first three: our electric passenger vehicles and our electric semi-truck, and then obviously our charging system as well. But I also wanted to just flag that we are not just on the transportation side. We also are addressing renewable energy with our solar products. We not only have a large solar panel business, but we also recently began deploying our solar rooftop, which is a solar tile where the solar system is actually embedded in a roof tile. So you sort of replace your whole roof with a solar system, which is really exciting and is definitely something to watch for the future in terms of how this market's going to grow. Beyond solar, we also have a pretty significant energy storage business. Here you see our Powerwall, which is for residential applications, as well as our Power Pack for commercial and industrial applications. We also have a Mega Pack that is widely used in utility scale applications. And all of this comes together through Tesla's developed software systems. So the key for what we're talking about today is EVs that we have on the road right now. So the last number I saw, we have about 14,000 electric vehicles in Maryland. That number is probably dated, so there's probably more on the roads right now. We have a number of sales locations throughout the state where we sell these 4 products that you see on the screen right here. So those of you who follow Tesla likely know that we started with our high-end as a Roadster, which was a expensive sport vehicle that really showed that EVs can do everything gas cars can do and do it better usually. And that sort of sparked the creation of this lineup of vehicles. So the first one, the white car there, is the Model S. That is our luxury sedan that has a 402 mile EPA range, which I believe is the first electric vehicle rated by the EPA, over 400 miles. And it is a luxury sedan, still quite popular, but it really launched Tesla in the commercial space. Next up is the first electric SUV, the Model X. Model X is a long-range SUV with a 370 plus mile range, which we're really excited about and has seen good pickup as well. And then our most popular vehicle, which is the Model 3, is the red car. Model 3 is really exciting because it was sort of the first EV in that $35,000 range that was able to achieve higher than 250 mile range, and is really the $38,000 price point is important because if you look at the numbers last year, the average price of a new car in the United States was $37,000 to $38,000. So this fits right in that market. Obviously, we and Elon said this recently. Our goal is to continue to reduce pricing and build even more affordable vehicles. Talking about a car at the 25,000 mile range or $25,000 range. So we are continuing to move that. All of our vehicles, and I'll get to the Model Y last, this year have seen price reductions. So as we continue to bring down our costs, we are reducing prices for customers. This year we saw the launch of the last car there, the Model Y, which is our crossover SUV. And we're really excited about that. This Model Y gets about 325 miles of range for under $50,000. It's bigger than the Model 3. It's spacious. It's got some new technology, the heat pump technology that's been really exciting in terms of making the vehicle even more efficient. All of our vehicles have 5-star safety ratings. The performance is tremendous. Everyone who drives them loves them. And we've shown that you can get high levels of range in electric vehicles so that you can essentially wake up in the morning and do everything you would need to do with your vehicle without worrying about charging up. Next slide. Okay. Next year, we're really excited to be introducing to kind of getting more into the truck market. These are the 2 products that we'll be launching next year, which is the Tesla Cybertruck on the left and the Tesla Semi on the right. The Cybertruck is Tesla's take on the pickup truck. Pickup trucks are most popular model vehicle in the US, but they're also some of the dirtiest in terms of pollution. Excuse me. So the Cybertruck certainly has some detractors. It is not your grandpa's pickup truck, but the initial interest in it has been through the roof in terms of pre-orders, and those are going to start being delivered this year. We have a single motor model with 250 mile range for under $40,000. And then we've got the double motor or the dual motor for 300 plus mile range, and the tri-motor that's going to have 500 miles plus range. So you get all of the performance that you would get with a gas pickup truck, but you will have no emissions, and it's going to look pretty interesting. I'm really excited for the other truck there. That's the Tesla semi truck. I've been working in heavy duty vehicle electrification for about 8+ years already. And the semi truck is going to revolutionize freight movement in the US and around the world. We announced this truck back in 2017, so it's taken some time, but we are, next year we've said we are going to be doing initial deliveries to customers of this truck. This truck is going to have, for the base model, we'll have 300 miles plus of range fully loaded, and our extended range version will have 500 miles plus fully loaded range for a semi truck. This means you can electrify virtually any truck in the United States for their duty cycle. Obviously, some long range cross country trucks will require significant infrastructure upgrades that we are working on, but most trucks that go out throughout the day to go, in an 8-hour shift, 500 miles is sort of the max they could be looking at. So we are really excited about getting these out. We were really thrilled that Maryland did sign on to the MOU, because it is essential that you get the policies in place to make electrified trucks, it attractive to bring electrified trucks into Maryland. Particularly, I wanted to talk briefly, just mention the California Clean Truck Rule, because it is essential that we get, that is an essential piece of this. Moving on quickly, because I'm over my time.
Yep.
We've got, and I believe you'll have all these slides, we've got our charging system. We just wanted to flag, we now have 20 locations in Maryland. Supercharge locations with over 100 plus stalls and 134 destination chargers. And then all that's just about charging, pretty self-explanatory. And then at the end, we have just, the seamless integration of our Tesla software with our vehicles is really important for our customers to be confident that they can get anywhere on an electric vehicle without worrying about charging or range anxiety. And I will stop now, and I apologize for going a bit over my time.
Okay, thank you, Zach. And there are some questions. So if you just, as everybody else, just hang on, there'll be some questions for you to talk a little bit more.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, and next we have from Rivian, we have Chris Nervers, and he is the Director of the Environment and Engineering Policy from Rivian. And Chris, we're so excited to have you. And I know you presented last year our bill hearing and did a great job. People were really, really excited. So please, Chris, you are on.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Rivian really appreciates the opportunity to speak today. I hope you can hear me and see my presentation.
You're good.
Great. Okay. So my name is Chris Nevers, and I'm Rivian's Director of Environmental Engineering and Policy. So what I'll do today is go over a little bit of who Rivian is, what our mission is, and what our plans are, and with a couple of suggestions with regard to the MOU we were talking about earlier. So our mission at Rivian is to keep the world adventurous forever. Some might say, well, what does that mean here? Well, if we're to take that apart and really concentrate on the forever piece, forever really means good stewardship or sustainability, and that means electrification. We take that seriously here at Rivian, and we're willing to work with anyone and everyone on making sure that happens across all segments of transportation, not just the segments where Rivian is, or even the markets where Rivian is. So let me go a little bit into the company and what we plan to do. So Rivian is a US-based company with production in Normal, Illinois, and engineering across the US. The vehicles you see there on your screen, essentially our truck, the R1S, SUV and the last mile delivery van. You're going to start seeing those in the roads, if not already in test form. You'll see delivered vehicles mid 2021. So that's 6-7 months from now. All these vehicles, at least for right now, are going to be between a gross vehicle weight of 8,500 and 14,000 pounds. So that's not how much they weigh necessarily. That's the curb weight plus what you can put in the vehicle. And beyond just the capability of the load and the mass of the vehicle, the vehicles across the top there, the R1T truck and the R1S SUV, they're going to have ranges, all electric drive ranges, projected EPA drive ranges. So these would be real world drive ranges between 200 and 400 plus miles. The pickup truck has a target of 11,000 pound tow capacity, and the full size SUV will have 5 and 7 passenger seating configurations. What's important about that is that these larger vehicles are displacing significant CO2 emissions, and that one full-size pickup or full-size SUV that goes electric displaces 60 to 70 tons of CO2. Now, smaller EVs certainly displace CO2 also, but what's important about these trucks and SUVs is not only to displace more CO2, but they're reaching a group that prior to the introduction of some of these vehicles never considered EVs. The majority of our EV pre-order customers indicate that this will be their first EV. So we're reaching consumers with these two vehicles that never considered EVs. So it's sort of like a double bonus, I guess you would say. Not only you're displacing more CO2 than maybe a pass car EV, but you're reaching people that had otherwise not considered electric vehicles. Similar to the CO2 reductions with the truck and the SUV, the last mile delivery van there, each one of those placed in service displaces close to 10 passenger cars worth of CO2 emissions. And on top of that, it eliminates the stop and go emissions you might get from diesel or other delivery vehicles. That's especially important in high population dense areas. Imagine, essentially no stop and go emissions. Not only that, but they run quiet. And as someone pointed out to me, you can actually pull these right into a building and not have to worry about emissions. So we're in a new class, I guess you would say, than you've seen EVs before. High volume production, and if you wanted to, you could go online today and configure an R1T or an R1S. And so what does that mean for today? One thing I wanted to bring up were implications with the MOU. All the vehicles I showed you, they're all in the 8,500 to 14,000 pound range. It goes up to 14,000 here because some of the last mile delivery vehicles could be heavier. Those can all be used toward complying with California's Advanced Clean Truck Rule. And so when you consider what you're going to do beyond the MOU, bear in mind that we have an agreement to deliver 100,000 of these last mile delivery vehicles. And that's in addition to the tens of thousands of pre-order truck and SUVs that would help to manufacturers in the industry to comply with any Advanced Clean Truck Rule. And then I would second what you heard from GM and Tesla, and that beyond the Advanced Clean Truck Rule or something like it, you do need to coordinate medium and heavy duty incentives. For example, I know other states like Massachusetts are looking at something like that. And then clean fuel standards, of course, are important. So you can influence the decision makers as far as those that build and would buy EVs and or infrastructure. And that's it for me. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions.
So Chris, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to see another American car manufacturer up and running in a startup fashion. I know it's hard in the middle of a pandemic, let alone just in a new industry. So thank you very much. And next is Josh Fisher, the Director of State Affairs for the Alliance of Automobile Innovation. You all, I think, have seen Josh before our committee several years in a row. So Josh, thank you so much for all you do in advancing EVs, Cleaner Air, please, you are up next.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Just remember to unmute myself there.
We're good.
All right, here we go. Nice to see everybody, even if virtually. Appreciate the invitation. So as Delegate Fraser Hidalgo said, I'm Josh Fisher from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. You can see a list of our members here on the screen. Collectively, our members produce about 99% of all the light-duty vehicles sold in the US. We also represent several technology companies involved in the AV and EV space. So I thought it'd be helpful to start with an overall view of the vehicle market because I think it will inform where we are with the EV market right now. This chart quickly summarizes where we are after COVID. You could see we plumbed the depths of the Great Recession in terms of drops in vehicle sales. You know, overall, we're down about 17% over 2019 sales volumes for all vehicles. So that's about 2.5 million vehicles. That's a big hole that we're going to have to dig out of, and it really impacts EV sales and all vehicle sales. And Maryland was one of the hardest hit states with vehicle sales down about 33%, which was the third highest in the nation. Here you have a graph of zero emission vehicle sales since July 2018. Nationwide, EV sales generally account for about 2% of all vehicle sales. And within that category, battery electric vehicles are about 1.45% of that. And that's down about a full percent from 2019. And PHEVs are about 0.5% of all ZEV sales, and they're down about 0.6% over 2019. So what's really driving all this? I think this chart does a good job of summarizing the impact of gas prices on what we see in the vehicle market. So the trend in upward sales of trucks and SUVs, you can really see where it started, and that's when gas prices went below about $3 a gallon. And they've remained consistently below $3 a gallon. So since about September 2014, light truck sales and SUV sales really took off, and they haven't stopped because you've got the perfect combination of cheap gas, more fuel efficient vehicles, and that's kind of driven where we are in the market now. In Maryland, 66% of new vehicle sales are trucks and SUVs, and sedans are only about 33%. Now to the industry commitment, our members are all in on electric vehicles. Right now, we've got over 40 EV models in the market, 16 battery electric, 25 PHEV, and 3 fuel cells. The industry is also committed to spend $250 billion on electrification by 2023. But combined with that, we're also going to need support from states. We're going to need incentives and infrastructure, and that will make sure that more electric vehicles are going to be available for sale in Maryland. Here's a graph of what we expect coming to the market over the next handful of years. So about 2025, we expect about 130 electric vehicle models in the market. That's a significant increase over the 40 or so currently available now. And here's a timeline of some investments from automakers. It's a little blurry, but I provided a link to the source document. This kind of lays out when and where companies are going to be investing in electrification, not only on vehicles, but also their entire operations, including manufacturing. So let's look at Maryland's market. I thought this map was informative. You can see where electric vehicles are most popular in the state. No surprise, in Montgomery and Howard, the two most affluent counties in the state, you have the highest concentration of electric vehicles. I think that does a good job of representing who's buying these vehicles right now. And as Secretary Grumbles noted, Maryland's got a long way to go to reach its goals of 300,000 vehicles by 2025. It's got about halfway to its 2020 goals. And most importantly, after the incentive expired in July 2019, you can see here the drop in sales. It was automatic. The last 6 months of 2019 sales were down. And in the first 6 months of 2020, you can see sales are down about 36% for electric vehicles in Maryland. And that's a combination of a lack of incentive and the impacts of COVID. But there's good news. The industry is committed to working with the states and Maryland to promote electric vehicles. And to do that, we're going to have to address costs, customers, and infrastructure. Broad electrification has to address all these issues. And Auto Innovators is developing policies to align vehicle deployment with supportive measures. So what are those measures? Auto Innovators supports incentives, infrastructure, fleet purchase requirements, low carbon fuel standards, updated building codes. It was also mentioned earlier, the Transportation Climate Initiative. That MOU should be going to Governor Hogan within the next week. We have sent a letter to the governor requesting him to sign on to the MOU. It's really going to be a great way to decarbonize the transportation sector, as well as provide funding for all these policies, because they don't come cheap, right? Incentives, infrastructure, it's going to cost money. And California is a perfect example of that. They've committed billions of dollars to their EV market, and that's why they have achieved the sales that they have. So we'll committed to work to Maryland on the following policies. Purchase incentives, it's critical, right? We just saw the graph where sales dropped after the incentive went away. Programs to educate and encourage consumers to purchase EVs, state fleet purchase requirements, reduce tolls on HOV lanes for EVs. There's a broad list of policies here that Maryland should address, and we're committed to working with you and the state to achieve your goals. Because like I said, the future of the industry is electrified. We are all in, and so we want to work together to achieve these common goals. So that's my pitch for today. I appreciate the time again, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thanks again.
Okay, great. So those are our manufacturers for light duty and passenger vehicles. Just a couple of points of order. For all of you, if you could please put your contact information in the chat, that would be great, because people are asking some questions that are very relevant, but they're slightly off topic, and I know we're kind of time crunched. Also, ADC is a nonprofit that has been before the committee. There's information in the chat on them. If you could, for our members and anybody else, they're always great to reach out to. And so I was going to do let's do a quick Q&A on the manufacturers, just to get them answered while everything is fresh in their minds, and then we'll go from there. Are there any questions for manufacturers? And I do have one quick question as to kind of a follow-up to Delegate Ruth's question about batteries. Can any of the manufacturers talk about what your battery development and or R&D manufacturing looks like? I know, because that wasn't able to be answered earlier, and it'd be great if anybody can chime in on that. Anybody?
Sure, I'd be happy to start. This is Zach with Tesla. I mean, I think the key thing I would point people to is Tesla did a battery day. I'm blanking when it was, but maybe 3 months ago, 2-3 months ago. And the slides are available publicly, where we really talk about a lot of the work that we have done, not only to date, but also in terms of research and development and the call to action, so to speak, for pushing for much greater development faster of batteries for EVs. We've also done a ton of work in terms of reducing cobalt in our batteries, and also developing local and US lithium sources. So there's been a lot of work done on that that's highlighted there, as well as some of the technological breakthroughs that we've made, along with efforts to reduce the cost both from production, extraction of batteries. And I think the other thing that's really key is recycling these batteries, and Tesla's got a robust program to do so. We really don't think any batteries should ever make it into a landfill. There's just a ton of valuable material in those batteries that can be extracted and reused. And in our effort to be sustainable, that is something we are certainly very focused on going forward.
Great, thank you. General Motors, anybody else? Josh, anybody want to comment on batteries?
Yeah,
I'll just jump into.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Josh. I'll be really quick here, just to say, Zach said all the same things. I think that I would say GM's really focused on this as a top priority, and ensuring that there is recyclability and reusability of those materials is key. And one of the ways to make sure that happens is to participate in working groups such as one that's been started in California, which is trying to imagine what the policy regime has to be to ensure that EV batteries become fully recyclable and reusable. And GM's taking a leading role there, I think, alongside many of the other manufacturers on this call. So that's a great example of how we can work together with government, academia, and others to ensure that we're introducing circularity into the EV battery ecosystem, if you will. And I think that's a model that could well be replicated in a state like Maryland as well.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, I'll comment on just the cost part of this. Broad adoption will not occur with electric vehicles until there's cost parity. And at that point, we won't need incentives and things like that. But until we reach that point, incentives are key because the cost difference in battery kilowatt hours has to get down to the parity point, which is probably expected to be about $100 per kilowatt hour. And I think right now the cost for battery is about $150 per kilowatt hour, roughly around there. So until we get that price parity, I think wide scale adoption is going to be difficult. And that's why, like I said, incentives and infrastructure are going to be key right now as a bridge to get us to that point.
Right, Chris?
Yeah, I would add one thing, and I heard Zach mention second use. All of our batteries right now are battery modules. By the way, they're going to be assembled in Norman, Illinois, are designed for second use, such that even if a battery lasted 8 to 10 years, it would have 8 to 10 years of second life. Essentially, that second life helps to decrease depreciation as well. So not only do you have a closed system and extended life, but you're basically decreasing any depreciation to the vehicle because there's a known second life. Thanks.
Right. Okay. And then just one last follow-up, Josh, because you brought it up. When we talk about price parity, I think it's really important to understand what the totality of price parity means. And that is that internal combustion engine vehicles, particularly fossil fuels, have been getting a lot of incentives for over 100 years. So when we talk about price parity, I think it's important to understand that to say that a particular pickup truck might cost $35,000 and then an electric pickup truck should also cost $35,000. I just want to make sure everybody understands that that pickup truck that costs $35,000, that's an ICE pickup truck, has been incentivized for over 100 years and is still incentivized as far as fuel costs are concerned. And on top of that, electric vehicles are much less expensive to own. So I just think it's important that we speak very specifically on these issues. And I know Chairman Barbe, you had a question, so I want to turn it to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a question for Rivian. I noticed your Amazon delivery truck. Now, obviously, an electric truck is going to cost more upfront than a gasoline-powered truck today, at least. So, roughly speaking, because these these trucks use electricity, they don't require oil changes, and they have lower maintenance costs. What is the payback period to a business for purchasing a delivery truck like that? I ask because I'm the CFO for a company which may consider buying something like this.
Well, that's a good question, and I can guarantee you that Amazon did the math. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but a lot of it does depend on what agreement they have with the utility and how they charge and maintain their fleet. But certainly there is a positive total cost of ownership. And if you wanted to, you could maybe get back in touch with me privately. We can go from there.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you. Again, please, everyone, make sure you put your contact information in the chat, as we do have a lot of questions. Is there anybody else? Delegate Boyce.
I'm sorry, I thought I messaged you, Delegate Frazier Hidalgo.
You probably did, guess, but I'm trying to keep up. So
you're slow. That's all right. That's okay. I think some of the question was answered, but I'd like to understand a little bit more as relates to cost parity, because clearly, I mean, the presentation shows those with, I'm sure, a larger capital or financing can afford these, right? And so when we talk about the increase of them, I just want to understand a little bit more why they cost so much. And I'm hearing it's because of the battery and because of the cost per kilowatt. So I just want to understand why it costs so much more. And I understand that the difference is that there's a less of a maintenance cost, but I just want to understand why it costs so much more.
Sure, I'll jump in from a higher level. The components that go into making batteries are more expensive. It's a newer technology. So those component parts, rare earth minerals, the supply chain has restrictions. A lot of the minerals aren't widely available, and so obviously that impacts cost. So when we talk about cost parity, it's the upfront point of purchase cost. And right now, an electric vehicle is on average about $12,000 more than an internal combustion engine vehicle. As others have referred to, the after purchase costs, maintenance and service, are expected to be lower. And that's why consumer education is really going to be important, right? Because people are just going to see that upfront cost and be like, well, I can't afford that right now. They don't think about the longer term cost savings that they can experience with an electric vehicle. And so that's a plug for consumer education. And the industry is contributing money to the Drive Change, Drive Electric campaign in the Northeast states, which Maryland, I believe, is a part of, to educate consumers and promote electric vehicles. But high level, that's the answer. Just the components that make up the batteries are more expensive right now. And that's how we measure it on a kilowatt per hour basis.
And I just add, I think one of the keys to driving down that cost will be scaling up the production of the batteries. As Josh mentioned, as you scale up, costs are going to come down on a per kilowatt hour basis. And the $156, whatever it is per kilowatt hour, that's the current pricing or costs, that the public costs, that that seems high, but it's also significantly lower than where it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The trajectory with which it's come down has been tremendous. It's taken a lot of work and research and development, but we're not quite to where we need to be. But I think everyone on this call is really, all of our companies are dedicated to bringing down those costs of the batteries so that we can bring down the cost of the vehicles.
And just to be also clear is that, and I forget which one, Tesla and GM don't have second life batteries, but Rivian does? Or did I get that wrong?
No, ours certainly have second lives. They could either be recycled or reused in energy storage applications, or put back into pull out, recycle all the valuable content to reuse in new batteries. So yeah,
okay, so
we are all focused on that, I believe.
It's a deconstruction recycling per se.
It depends on the pack and how long it's been used, but we could either or. Sorry, go ahead.
And how long
Chris.
does a battery actually last?
Well, I guess I can jump in. How long it lasts depends on the duty cycle it's exposed to, and it's going to change based on manufacturer, how they make the battery, and then how they manage the battery. But if it were to last 8 to 10 years, and say a Rivian battery, and the reason why I say it's second life is our batteries are modular, so you could basically take these battery modules out like a square box and put them in a cabinet, and that cabinet could be used as backup either for your house or your charger, what have you. That would be our second life. So it's not used in the car again necessarily. It's used as backup for your home or for a charging unit. And I can't speak for Tesla, but I think some of their units could be used in their Powerwall backup. And as far as battery age, it really depends on how you use it. If you imagine if someone were to cycle it continuously versus park it in the garage and use it maybe 12 or 14,000 miles a year, and the degradation rates would change. So it's kind of hard to just come up with a number. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me, and I'm asking these questions because I mean, if this is the future, and look, I'm certainly not, high capital. If somebody wants me to buy this car, I can't buy a $35,000 car right now, and like at all, like not 10 years ago, not 10 years from now. And so I'm just thinking about it as this is supposed to be the future, and there are already potentially questions about, even with this adaptation, are we also just creating also another environmental issue? When we talk about like the battery and then the battery life and like how long is it used? And so, I drive my car maybe 5,000 miles a year now for the last couple of years because I used to walk to work. And even now that I do this, I can get around in other ways other than my car. So for something like that, for instance, like how long would a battery last if I'm only using it 5,000, miles per year? Is it like a manual car where like the longer it sits, the worse condition that it becomes, or it's better? So, when we talk about consumers and education, like these are the questions, because it is so much different than, my gas powered car.
Right. And one thing I can add to that is California and others are looking at battery life metrics. that are accessible to the consumer. So if you're looking at a used electric vehicle, you will know the state of battery health, if you will. And California spoke to that in their Advanced Clean Car 2 workshop. So we expect that will be a requirement going forward. And certainly, I believe on our vehicles, you'll be able to access as a customer or a potential used car buyer, the state of health of the battery, so it's not a surprise. You know exactly what you're getting.
And if I can just add very quickly, Delegate Boyce, these are really good questions. And I guess I just want to say, and I think I can probably speak for all of us when I say that industry has every expectation that EVs will be a better ownership experience in the end than a conventional vehicle. And that means that the battery is going to be there to serve your needs as long as you own that vehicle. And ultimately, then from an environmental perspective, that battery has capacity to be reused and repurposed when it's no longer fit for vehicle use, but still has plenty of life left in it to do a stationary storage job, for example. So I think while Chris is right, it all kind of depends, and it's hard to put a number on it specifically. The general concept is I think these cars will be there to serve everyone's needs robustly throughout their lives, and there shouldn't be any kind of ownership experience change versus what you're used to today, except in a positive sense where you're maintaining the vehicle less often, it's cheaper to operate, your fuel is cheaper because you're plugging it in, not going to the gas station, and so on. This is all a positive story, I think, for the most part.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and Delegate Boyce brings up, I think, a lot of good questions, and I look at it from kind of a historical perspective, and I feel like we are today in the revolution or the evolution of transportation. Hence, this looking forward as to where the country was in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, industrial revolution, pre-World War I. It's kind of an amazing time to watch the development. Delegate Ruth, did you have a question as well?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. When my husband and I bought a car in 2017, we looked at the EVs and we ended up deciding to buy a hybrid because we, at least pre-pandemic, several times a year drive up to New Hampshire to visit our son, and which is about a 600-mile trip. And you all highlighted the advances in range and charging times. It's all very exciting. It seems like progress is being made. I think if I remember right, the Tesla truck has a range of something like 500 miles. Although I don't know if that's because the larger footprint of the truck allows a higher capacity battery. So, it's important, obviously, for adoption, for people to be able to drive where they want, when they want. And so what are the prospects for either batteries that will last for a cross-country trip or, charging that won't disrupt a trip too much in terms of time?
I could take a first stab at that. And I had to rush through a bit on the supercharging piece of my presentation. But that's one of the things Tesla proactively did, is to go out and build a supercharging network. We've built these chargers at locations where customers can pull off and go, their amenities, like whether it's supermarkets or restaurants or 7-Elevens or whatnot, where they could stop and charge up. And the latest generation, the Gen 2 or Gen 3, I should say, superchargers gets 250 kilowatt chargers, so that's quite significant. So in 20-30 minutes you could add quite a bit of range to your vehicle. So in our car, if you came in, you could basically put in your final destination and it would tell you where along the way up you can stop to charge and how long you would need to charge. And it'll, as you pull up, it'll tell you, it'll get your battery prepared. So, you could start charging at full blast as soon as you get in, as opposed to kind of warming up the battery when you get there. So there's other features like that. So I think that network is getting more and more robust, more and more EV charging companies are out there putting in charging stations. A lot of the VW mitigation funding has gone to charging stations. So our system is set up that you can get virtually anywhere, any trips within the 50 states, the 48 states, I should say. Getting up to Alaska might be difficult right now, but there is a system set up to allow that trip from Maryland to New Hampshire to happen seamlessly. It would take longer because you'd have to, it's not a, quick pull into the gas station right now, but we are, each generation of charger is faster than the one before it. The batteries are getting better to take that fast charging. So that is where we're working towards, where you can not worry at all about going on those long trips and have that capability.
Thank you.
And I know a lot of the others are working on that as well. Not only on the charging, number of chargers, speed of chargers, but also on the miles. Some predicted in the future you may have 500, 700, even 1,000-mile battery packs as the tech develops. So you might not even need to stop to charge in 5 or 10 years.
That would be
Okay,
great.
I'd like to move on again. If everybody, if you haven't put your information, put it in the chat.
Dave, I've got one last question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, this is for industry, and it's since cost has come up. I understand that Bloomberg New Energy Finance estimates that by the year 2025, electric vehicles will be basically the same price as comparable gasoline vehicles. Does that prediction of theirs sound right to you?
Good question.
It does. This is acting with Tesla, and I think I'd point out now, like I mentioned, our Model 3 at $38,000 is comparable to a similar gas car. Not all of them, but I think as you'll see more and more models come out there, that 2025 timeframe seems reasonable. And those Bloomberg guys do a lot of research on that.
Sorry, Zach, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think, Chairman, really great question. I think one complicating factor just to continue bearing in mind is that at the same time, we've got sort of the countervailing pressure to keep adding range to the vehicles as that becomes technologically possible with battery costs coming down, because consumers do want to have as much as they can on board rather than having to rely on frequent charging. So that's sort of a countervailing pressure that does provide a bit of upward lift to prices and is going to make it a little bit more challenging in some segments to reach that goal by 2025. But the story absolutely is one of continuing to bring down costs and making these vehicles more and more accessible to more and more of the market, 100%. But it's going to vary a little bit segment by segment, vehicle by vehicle, and you do see this pressure from the buying public to want to put as much as they can in that battery out of the gate.
And I would add one more thing to that, another caution, and that nobody wants yesterday's iPhone, and that means that all other things being equal, that's just not going to happen. So tomorrow's EV, it's going to go way beyond today's ICE or even today's EV. If you look at, for example, all the autonomy features that are being added. So yes, the cost of vehicle might be going up, but how they're being utilized, hopefully in the future will just blow your mind. So you'll more than get your money back on total cost of ownership. But it is hard to predict those things. Certainly you can do gross projections based on EV costs, or EV battery costs, but maybe not total vehicle costs.
One other point to note, just that's going to be an exciting development. It's just the development of the used EV market. I think 2/3 of cars that are purchased each year are used. So getting more and more EVs that are on their second or third owner will really expand the number of people who have EVs and can see them. But I think as these initial deployments go out, you'll start to see more and more robust used market begin to take hold as well, which I think
that's what I did. I bought a used EV.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, we've had some conversations, and I think we need to have more conversations about figuring out how to incentivize the used EV market. That is a really huge piece that I've worked a little bit on the last couple of years, trying to figure out how to make that work. And I think that's a really big piece to get to Delegate Boyce's questions and a lot of questions. I mean, we incentivize the new ones, and I know incentivizing the used ones can be more complicated in some ways, but I think that's something we need to really wrap our heads around. So if that's all right, I'd like to move on. We have an administrator, Kevin Quinn from MDOT, who has been so wonderfully patiently waiting for us. I appreciate it so much. He does such great work, and I know we worked on some bills last session that just kind of kind of imploded because of COVID. And so, Administrator Quinn, you're on. Thank you again. I appreciate it. And thank you everybody that came and already spoke. Thank you. Please make sure you leave your information in the chat so that folks can reach out to you. And again, Administrator Quinn, please.
All right, great. Well, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? I was like to do a check before I get like 5
You're great.
minutes in it.
You're great.
And everybody tells me I'm awful. So, Chairman, Vice Chairman, delegates, members of the committee, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to talk about this really exciting topic of electric buses at Maryland Transit Administration. So let me see what I can do to share my screen here. And we'll see. This is always a miracle when this happens. All right. Can you all see that okay?
You're good.
Wonderful. Okay, so I've got about a dozen slides here. I'll try to zip through them, but you know, the gist of the conversation here is we're really moving towards electric and automated vehicles at MDOT MTA. Just talking broadly for a second, you know, regarding zero emission vehicles and connected autonomous vehicles in the transit industry, we've really seen rapid growth in the industry with about 2,500 battery electric, about 100 hydrogen fuel cell buses that have been manufactured to date. A lot of those ZEVs today are pilots. There's only a handful of 25 plus deployments. And I say that because keep in mind that we have a fleet of about 750 buses. And so, you know, those mass deployments are important to us. We're excited about the Biden transition and some of the commitments that have been made, providing every American city with 100,000 people or more residents with high quality zero emissions public transportation options. That's great. I want to keep in mind some lessons learned. I'll talk a bit about that, some challenges that some transit agencies have had with their ZEV deployments. SEPTA has a fleet of about 25 electric buses that have been out of service about 6 months. They've had some issues. New York City Transit has faced some electric grid issues, some issues with their bus depots, and so some good lessons learned for us here in MTA. And some of those first automated transit buses are just emerging. So in order to kind of get our hands around this, you know, we did our own zero emissions vehicle bus study that really focused on how do we get to 50% of our bus fleet transition to zero emission by 2030. And some of the considerations for us, one is technology, really comparing electric and hydrogen fuel cell costs and capabilities. Taking a look at service, whether current technology can support the bus routes that exist today. And I'll dive more into that. Charging, while we talk a lot about vehicles, I will tell you that there is just as much cost in our facilities, in bus storage and maintenance facilities, and whether they can be retrofit successfully for zero emission buses. And then there's also phasing and financing, keeping in mind that we are a 24/7 operation. We cannot just kind of shut down one of our 4 bus divisions and say, we're going to focus on making this ZEV ready. We've got a whole city to continue to provide transit for. So from taking a look at our technology options, you know, what we really found is that battery electric buses are currently just more practical, we believe, than hydrogen fuel cell due to lack of hydrogen fuel access and some fire safety requirements. I noted those numbers of about 2,500 battery electric buses and 100 fuel cell buses, but there are some varied performance and reliability concerns that exist. I'll note that back in 2018 and 2019, we had 3 battery electric bus manufacturers come to MTA, and we did some testing. And I'll note that some of the issues you note here with hot and cold weather, heavy passenger loads, topography, battery decay, some of those things we experienced with those tests that we did. But battery capacity is rapidly growing. We had just had a great discussion on that, which I really appreciated listening in on. But we do have a variety of weather. We are not just sort of a standard climate. We're not Hawaii where it's like 70, 75 all day. We have a variety of weather, and Baltimore is a pretty hilly place. And so we got to take that topography into account, but technology is evolving rapidly and we want to be as flexible as possible. I know this is a really small chart, but I wanted this in here graphically. So what this shows is, you know, we took a look at where the battery electric bus technology is today and how much service we could complete if we had battery electric buses. And this line here really shows where how much battery is required. This over here is percentage of service we could complete going from 0 to 100. And basically where we are today, we could complete about 50% of our current bus service with current battery electric bus technology. And that has to do with the way that we schedule our blocks, essentially our runs of work for our operators. And it also has to do with the amount of battery required. And so out here is a projection of 2030, the kilowatt hours that would be required to operate that. And so while we can only do about 50% today, what we're looking at is that if battery advances continue, the buses we'd be able to purchase in 2030 will likely be able to run nearly all of our service, but that's not where we are today. So what we're looking at for the sort of foreseeable future is some mixed fleet with some diesel to support, all weather conditions, power outages. And I also want to keep in mind, something that we've discussed a lot is being able to support statewide emergency evacuation. So, when Ocean City has a hurricane coming and they say, hey, we may need to evacuate people, who are you going to call? MTA. And so, we're at the ready with, 100 buses that need to get out there. So, let's say we were to send out 100 buses, do they have the charging capacity to get there? Do they have the charging abilities to get back? So we've got to take a look also at those emergency considerations as well. Taking a look at infrastructure, I touched on this, vehicles are sexy and fun to talk about. We've also got to talk about the facilities and the charging infrastructure that we have. So we looked at our 4 bus divisions, Kirk, Northwest, Eastern, and our Bush division. And what we found is that those facilities can be outfitted for charging, but they do need electric grid upgrades needed for the conversion of each of our bus facilities. Charging infrastructure for full fleet conversions would reduce bus capacity at some of our divisions. Many of you have been to our bus divisions or driven past them. You may see that our buses are packed in like sardines. And so the minute you have to start making space and alterations to our footprint for charging stations or whatever that charging infrastructure is, you essentially lose parking spots. And so that's critical for us to be able to have that flexibility. Going through our divisions one by one, Kirk is our newest bus division. We're actually about to open up a new facility in February, and it's got a high ability to be retrofit and includes space for charging infrastructure. Northwest could accommodate both energy types. Eastern is one in particular that the current facilities are really beyond the useful life, and we need to really redo that entire Eastern facility in tandem with electric charging investment in order to make a lot of this work. And our Bush division is low in terms of compatibility. The site layout is our oldest facility. It's where the old trolley company was laid out. There's historic impacts. There's potential contamination underneath. And so the minute we start digging in, we have a feeling we're going to run into some issues. So we got to be careful there. Don't want to forget on route charging. So while buses can primarily be charged at our bus facilities out along the routes, they may need to be charged out on the routes as well. So we have to look at where we do and where we don't own land and potentially lease of additional area where we could put in charging stations. And again, a point that I made earlier, this idea that we have to continue to provide reliable 24/7 daily operations during construction. So even if we're focused on one division or a couple divisions, we have to keep that service running for the region. Some workforce considerations, and I want to convey that these have been things that we've been talking with ATU Local 1300, our union that represents our operators and our mechanics, but we recognize that there will need to be extensive employee training and new job descriptions. If you read our collective bargaining agreement that defines what an A repairman, a B repairman, a C repairman do, it's the exact same language that was used back in 1972. And so those will need to be dramatically updated. And we've talked to other agencies about how to update those, but I can tell you right now that your mechanic often looks more like an IT technician kind of than a traditional mechanic. We need to change our agency's procedures, the way that we schedule, the way that we have to do bus assignments. The first electric vehicles that we get, we can't just kind of throw them out on any route. We will have to look very specifically about how long that route is from a mileage perspective, from a topography perspective, and how we do that scheduling across our entire fleet. And again, coordination with the union and contract changes are really going to be critical. So let's talk dollars. We did a cost estimate as part of our study and taking a look at 50% MTA ZEV transition. And what you look at is for the period of 2025 to 2030, we'll need approximately $300 to $350 million. We replace about 70, 75 buses per year. That comes out to approximately 850,000 per bus right now. For our clean diesels, we're about 550 to 600,000. And so that's about 20 to 25 million a year more than diesel buses, up to about, but we will see up to about 8.5 million per year in fuel cost savings. The charging infrastructure I noted is just as important. You know, our Eastern Division bus redevelopment really needs to be coordinated with that. And we want to look at any lease finance options that we have as part of a fueling contract. And we could potentially, do some creative financing there. There's a lot of equity benefits that, we realize that are part of this that are really important to us and important to me. One is emissions and noise reduction system wide. We have FTA requirements that do preclude assigning buses to specific neighborhoods. You sort of have to spread them out, but we recognize that the larger the bus fleet gets, the greater the benefits to the entire region. We also see the ability here to reduce diesel emissions and noise near bus maintenance facilities. And that's a common concern with us with the communities that we're around. But we know that this has the ability to really address some of those legacy social equity concerns that still remain today. We've also seen that in places where transit agencies have improved the power capacity, it can also improve the electric grid resiliency for the surrounding neighborhood as well as the bus depots move towards that stronger electric grid. It's also just, quite frankly, a cleaner work environment for our maintenance and operations employees. We do have some projects underway I wanted to touch on. I noted that in 2018, 2019, we had some battery electric demonstrations completed with our manufacturers. We did recently win a $2.6 million grant with FTA, their low and no emissions grant. That's a funding pilot for us to purchase 3 60-foot battery electric buses, as well as the accompanying charging infrastructure. Those buses will be in service in 2022. And as Secretary Grumbles noted, there was the Volkswagen settlement. And so we're getting about $3 million out of that for 4 40-foot battery electric buses and charging infrastructure. Again, we'll see those buses in service in 2022. We're doing some, while we talked a lot about the electric vehicle piece, we're also doing some CAV research and development and testing. We did work with Steer. This was touched on by Administrator Nizer, but we tested an automated valet parking at one of our MARC parking lots. So that was pretty cool. Went out and checked that out and rode around in it. At Trade Point Atlantic, we're looking at a first last mile kind of automated shuttle pilot. We're looking at where shuttles are being used in kind of a campus environment. So how can we send buses to an area like a Trade Point, and they could then have an automated shuttle that circulates employees around a campus? That is currently delayed due to COVID-19. I do want to note that. We do have a pending grant application for an automated connector between Penn Station, Cultural Center Light Rail, and our State Center Metro. That could be very cool. And we're, of course, participating in the MDOT CAV work group. Last slide. Just want to note, our continued commitment to meeting this goal of 50% bus fleet transition to ZEV by 2030. I want to note that these goals are laid out in the regional transit plan as well to initiate the ZEV procurement and implement a CAV project by 2025 and to achieve a 95% zero emission vehicle fleet by 2045. And lastly, there's agencies coming out with lessons learned every day on their electric vehicle fleet, the challenges that they're having. And so I think it's really critical that we build on some of those lessons learned as we look to purchase vehicles and really renovate some of our older facilities. So with that concludes my presentation. I know there's a lot in there. I will stop sharing, and I'm happy to take any questions, or I don't know if you want to go to the next presentation, but I'm here.
You're awesome. You're amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. First question that goes to Chairman Barbe.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dave. Kevin, good to see you. The slides went by quickly, so I just want to verify some numbers. I think I saw you say that the additional cost for an battery electric bus was $25 million, but that the annual savings, is it that the annual savings is 8.5 million, or is that over the lifetime of the vehicle?
We've seen annual fuel savings of about 8.5 million per year.
So that's roughly a payback of 3 years, roughly.
You do. You start to see it back. That's right.
Okay, that's fantastic news. And let me also thank you for pointing out that some of your bus fleet has to be able to respond to emergencies around the state of Maryland. It's not an issue I'd ever thought of, but that's really important to keep in mind. Thank you very much, Administrator Quinn. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? I have a question if I don't. Delegate Learman. Unmute yourself.
Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is really interesting. Could you talk a little bit about the infrastructure or the space for the infrastructure? So right now you have a few lots around the region or the city. Would you need additional space in addition to, the infrastructure, all the infrastructure and the charging infrastructure that you would need to buy? Would you need to have like another bus transit station parking lot because the infrastructure is bigger and it takes up more space to charge, or what do you think? And it takes longer. What are you thinking?
So it's a great question. So our study, the study did not go into depth of if you have a charging station that is 5 feet by 10 feet of a footprint. They didn't go into the exact details. But the gist of your question, I think I would answer yes. We either need a complete overhaul of our Eastern bus division, which is right over there off of Eastern Avenue. And those of you who have probably passed it on 95, you can get a really good view looking down at the buses. If you go there, you will see them packed in. And just imagine that there now have to be charging stations throughout. And so I think that there's a redevelopment of Eastern and potentially a fifth bus division, or at least a location where we would need to charge vehicles. That sort of fifth location isn't reflected in the costs that I noted. That really reflects charging capacity capabilities at our bus divisions and a redevelopment of Eastern. And just one more thing, I'll just note that there are different types of charging facilities around the country. So you have sort of a standard, plug a nozzle into a bus type of a facility. You also have other places where they're essentially installing, I think at LA Metro, there's sort of like an overhead catenary system where a bus could drive in and essentially a catenary would raise or lower and touch the bus. The bus would know when it's done and it could drive off. So depending on what kind of charging infrastructure you go affects those space needs.
Right. David, when we were in Nashville for NCEL, I saw there was a bus station that had the overhead charging. Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. I mean, that seems like a huge cost. So probably at some point should be built into any fiscal note analysis or, anything to help us understand, not because we don't want to do it, but because we want to make sure that we're budgeting for you all appropriately when we do it. Thanks.
Makes sense.
And Delegate Learman, to your point about the fiscal analysis, I think from an environmental justice perspective, the idea that you are taking all or a good number of those diesel depots as well as buses off of the particularly urban areas is
that would be great. That would be great. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm all in. I just want to make sure that MTA doesn't have to cut every other thing it's doing in order to be able to do this. So
no, and I think you're absolutely right. And when you take into consideration what Delegate Barbe said as well as what you just said, it's kind of a no-brainer. Anyway, did I have somebody next?
Andrea has a question.
Andrea?
Yeah, hi, thank you.
Yes.
So we've been talking about cost and the economics of it, and it's we're changing over everything. So the question that I have is, are these costs going to be passed on to the consumer or the riders? I would assume that I can't necessarily speak definitively for Baltimore, which is, I guess, where the majority of these buses are. But, those individuals may or may not be able to afford one of these electric vehicles and move around. And so they're taking the buses as it is. Is that cost going to be passed on to them? And can we expect that the cost of ridership is going to be higher?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know that I have the ability to pass on the costs to riders. Fares are set by state law by the legislature. There's a state law that was put in place that bus, light rail, metro, our core services can go up a maximum of 10 cents every 2 years. We'd have a bus fare change coming up on July 1st of 2021. So every 2 years, it could go up by 10 cents, and that's against state law. And then on our commuter bus and our MARC system is every 5 years.
Okay.
And so how would I say this? I guess it would be up to the state legislature to set a higher limit.
Okay.
If we wanted to recapture that and have a higher fare box recovery as a result of these higher costs.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
And Delegate Harrison, on that too, I guess back to Delegate Learman. How we make this change as far as the fiscal impact, we just have to look at the whole picture of it. Because I agree with you, like we can't put this on necessarily the backs of the riders, but think about all the money that's saved by people not going to the ER with asthmatic problems in some of these neighborhoods. So we have to find a creative way of making this happen. Very, very good. Very, very good point, Delegate Harrison. Very good point. Any other questions? Is there anybody I am missing? Delegate Stein. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess just as a follow-up, Kevin, the department's planning is to take the $25 million a year out of the Transportation Trust Fund. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. Any of our funding would come out of the trust fund. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Am I missing anybody? I'm having a little trouble keeping up with all the chat, so I'm looking at people. Delegate Boyce, thank you.
I just want to say one thing. Before my life here with the legislature, which feels like 100 years versus 3, I worked with the Kirk Depot group who advocated heavily to change the bus depot around there because of the high cancer rates. And so I'm certainly an advocate for the change in these buses, because when MTA first got their new fleet, those fleets first went to that depot, a majority of them, to be able to cut down on the idling and the buses outside. And so I'm certainly in huge support of this. But like Delegate Fletcher Harrison said, not at the cost of us if we're also saving the money. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point. I think, the switch to electric can have just some tremendous benefits for communities across the region.
Am I missing anybody?
I have another bite at the apple here.
Yes, please.
So I'm really astounded that the payback period is 3 years. I mean, that's really fantastic. And so I was wondering if anyone contemplated taking Delegate Harrison's thoughts into, point of view into perspective. Has anyone contemplated an interagency loan fund where you get that upfront $25 million paid back amortized over the life of the bus with interest, in order so that there won't be a sudden increase upfront of the operating costs? Has anyone ever contemplated something like that?
I know that I don't know. I don't know that we delved into that much detail with our study, but I think really the next step of this, of kind of what you're getting at, is how do we make it happen, right? I think that's what you're getting at, so that there aren't these costs that just hit.
I mean, a payback period of 3 years is pretty astounding.
I think just to clarify, I think that 8.5 was an annual cost. The 20 to 25 million is an annual increase. So I think the 8.5 pays back over 3 years what the 1 year increase would be.
Okay, that's completely different from what I thought.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I may have misspoke.
Okay. Oh well.
There are still all the other advantages.
It's still great advantages, still great benefits.
There's still, okay, is there any other questions for Kevin? Thank you so much for your patience. And I know, I think this committee did pass Delegate Corman's bill to help move that along. I think it was unanimously, and it is supported by the governor and TI2 as well. So just FYI. Okay, thank you so much. again,
Thank you.
Kevin. So while putting this agenda together, I kind of wanted to break things up into the things that we deal with the most, which is the passenger vehicles. And then we move to transit buses, which are well on their way. And then I wanted to talk briefly, we're talking about electrification of school buses. Sometimes that comes to our committee, it's duly assigned, sometimes not. But with that said, I want to assure the committee, we did reach out to some of the bus manufacturers and we're not able to get any of them on the call. And we have reached out to Duncan McIntyre, who's our next speaker, who's the CEO of Highland Electric Transportation. So Duncan is going to kind of pinch hit on the technology of the electrification as well as the other benefits, and briefly about what his company does, because it's part of the transition of how we get there. So and I know that he has been before the committee, I think 2 or 3 years in a row, and always does a fantastic job. And with that, Duncan, you are on. Thank you so much for being here.
Mr. Delegate, thank you very much. So in lieu of slides, I have been listening to this conversation, and I'd love to pick up on a theme that that is very much relevant, which is about total cost of ownership. As background, my name is Duncan McIntyre. I'm the CEO of a company called Highland Electric Transportation, and we focus exclusively on school bus electrification. We act as a partner for municipalities seeking to make the transition. And I think one of the central themes is, even if total cost of ownership is favorable over a 12-year vehicle life, it's very hard to ask the taxpayer today for millions of extra dollars on the promise that the payback will materialize. And so we make that bet for municipalities. We put up the money, we install infrastructure at the depots, we purchase the vehicles, and then we charge them and pay for repairs. We allow the municipality to put their own mechanics to work doing the repairs. We purchase the electricity from, Pepco or Baltimore Gas and Electric, whoever the utility might be. But ultimately, the reason why the model has gained traction in many states, including Maryland, is because we're shifting that risk around total cost of ownership to someone making a bet with private capital. And what that assures is that the taxpayer never pays more than what's in the existing budget today. So we are working closely with a few counties in Maryland, and we're very optimistic that one in particular will announce a large school bus electrification program within a couple months. But Mr. Quinn talked a little bit about the duty cycles of transit buses. When you look at a school bus, the technology has also improved considerably on the heels of the transit industry. The battery packs and the electric motors used to move an electric school bus are the same in most cases as those in transit buses.
I'm sorry, can I stop you for 1 second, Duncan?
Yep.
For all those that aren't speaking, if you could please mute your mute, we're hearing some background. Thank you.
So the point being that the transit industry has developed reliability and driven the cost down. It's still more expensive up front, but that technology has benefited school bus electrification. The vehicles today have 120 to 140 miles of range, and the typical school bus route is only 30 or 40 miles in the morning and 30 or 40 miles in the afternoon. In rural areas, that can be 50 or 60 miles in the morning and another 50 or 60 in the afternoon. But the duty cycle is light enough that 90+% of the fleets across the state could be transitioned based on existing technology today. We don't say 100% because some buses are needed for longer trips, like sporting games and things like that. We think in a few years, the network of charging will be available to accommodate that as well. But the bottom line is the technology is here today. Costs are coming down. And for large districts that have an interest, there are public-private partnerships available that can make that transition at scale in a budget-neutral manner. I think a couple quick comments. We talked a little bit earlier about Volkswagen funding and other ways that incentives can help accelerate this industry. Absolutely agree that incentives are very helpful at getting the ball rolling. But if you look at the pockets of capital, 2 million here, 3 million there, they are typically putting very few new vehicles on the road. And what the state needs is lots of new vehicles that are zero emissions. So getting there requires the industry to build a really enduring ecosystem around accelerating this movement. We think if more entities like ours can take on the risks of what the fueling and operating costs will actually be and help bridge that incremental gap up front, that will accelerate things. If the utilities are able to offer more make-ready support, that will also accelerate things because infrastructure is expensive and needs to be considered within the broader context of total project costs. But I guess I'll just wrap it up by saying, from a cost standpoint, yes, it is much more expensive today, but we're at a tipping point where that total cost of ownership framework is getting to be quite strong. And whether the taxpayer funds capital and takes the risk, or private entities like us fund the capital and take the risk, there's a budget neutral process for electrifying municipal fleets, buses and trucks. And we think that process will only accelerate over the coming years as the OEMs continue to drive their prices down. And I'll just leave you with one quick fact, one statistic, and then I'm happy to answer questions. But if you look at a new electric school bus last year in Maryland, you were talking about $350,000 compared to a diesel, which is $150,000. So a premium of 2.5 to 3 times. In 2024, we will be able to buy that same electric school bus for closer to $240,000. So a full 35% lower than last year. And that the price is steadily coming down between now and then. That declining cost curve is going to help accelerate the transition and will result not in a budget neutrality, but in true discounts to the budget in coming years. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great, Duncan. Thank you. If you could just hang on, we're going to go to trucking and utilities, and then that way, because all of them are kind of have the same kinds of questions. Thank you so much, Duncan, for that presentation. And next will be Louis Campion from the Maryland Trucking Association. Louis, thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation, Delegate. Can you hear me okay?
You're good. You're good.
Great. Thank you. So just real briefly, we are really on the cusp of some of the greatest changes really in the industry's history in the areas of automated vehicles and in fuel and emissions reductions. And those are the two areas that Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo asked me to address. And I just want to touch base really quickly so everybody understands how rapidly these things are changing. And what you see on the screen right now is literally headlines from Transport Topics, our national newspaper, that appeared in the last 3 weeks. So this is just me pulling headlines in 3 weeks about electrification, about hydrogen fuel, about autonomous vehicles, automated driving systems, and the like. And so the ball is moving so quickly, and things are changing so rapidly. That said, I'm going to start on the connected and automated vehicle piece. And for us, I know you heard Chrissy Nizer talking earlier and the like, our focus is really on driver assist technology, right? So it's really about improving safety. As it was already illustrated, many of the same safety systems that you have on your car are readily available on trucks now, whether that be collision stopping, electronic stability to prevent rollovers, lane departure warning, all of which can really improve both safety and the quality of life for a truck driver, as well as traffic flow and efficiency. What you see on your screen now is really just an illustration of several of those various safety technologies and how they might appear on a truck. I'm going to show a very brief 1-minute video actually on the image that you have at the top left corner, which is on truck platooning. Since you all have led the charge here in Maryland with passage of the legislation that eliminates the following too closely bill law, and we'd like to see that obviously get through the Senate this year. So with that, let me go ahead and just show this video.
The Federal Highway Administration's Turner Fairbank Highway Research Center demonstrated truck platooning technology. This innovation allowed 3 trucks to travel together as a cooperative adaptive cruise control platoon, or CACC platoon. CACC uses the radar sensors and electronic actuation of engine and brakes used by conventional adaptive cruise control systems available on today's vehicles. CACC adds vehicle-to-vehicle communications, enabling a smoother, closer following vehicle control system. For each truck in the platoon, the driver continued to steer while the CACC system controls speed adjustments. When one of the trucks detects a cut-in vehicle, it automatically slows down and opens the gap to a safe distance behind the cut-in vehicle, then readjusts the gap to the original distance when the cut-in vehicle leaves the platoon. Safety is enhanced using collision avoidance features like those available on vehicles now. This truck platooning technology demonstrated that CACC allows trucks to drive safely and smoothly at shorter gaps than they can under conventional manual driving. Potential benefits include better utilization of the highway through increased throughput, improved fuel economy, and lower operating costs.
So with that, I'm just going to jump right into my next slide. I know you guys have a very short time window, but some great opportunities for improvement there. And the projected fuel efficiency gains, even under a traditional diesel model, are between 4 and 10% fuel savings. So let me sort of lead into kind of the environmental issue and improvements that we're seeing in this industry. And with this slide, what I just really want you to take home is, one, we've had a number of environmental improvements, all garnered by federal mandate that started in 2007 and have continued to take place over the last 15 years in this industry, and will continue to take place over the next 7 years, where you will see roughly another 34% greenhouse gas emissions reduction from a traditional tractor trailer by 2027. And just to give you some mindset, right, a model year 2010 truck, it takes 60 model year 2010 trucks to equal the emissions from one 1988 truck. So in 30 years, basically, you have 60 trucks outputting the emissions of one 88 truck. Now that's going to go much differently in the future as well. So in spite of those improvements, we have major opportunities. We've already heard from Tesla on their truck side, and great fuel changes that are going to further lower or eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. And to put it in perspective, our industry is fuel neutral. The fuel really doesn't matter to us. What matters is that the fuel is available, that it's affordable, not unreasonably priced, and that it's accessible and doesn't have any negative impact on our operating equipment, because we need to deliver all of those essential products that people need. We've talked about a number of options Some of them today, electric, obviously a big driver, hydrogen fuel cell, natural gas is being readily utilized in certain areas of the country. And then as a bridge fuel in many cases, biofuels and renewable diesel. There are some challenges to widespread adoption that I want to make sure people understand, and they vary by industry sector. And, you know, our association represents everybody from the UPSs and FedExes of the world who are running tractor trailers and package delivery vehicles to the work industry. So dump trucks, concrete mixers, and the like, all of which have different operating needs. And so as we look at different mandates, different opportunities, those are going to vary, different challenges. They're going to vary based on type of operation. One of the biggest is certainly battery capacity and range. We've already heard that Tesla has a battery that will go up to 500 miles. That really is about the outer limit that you need to achieve. In fact, I had read that their most recent battery day, they had about a 50% improvement actually forthcoming with future battery. Battery weight is a major component. Batteries for a truck can weigh several tons, and that does significantly reduce the payload on a vehicle, which could potentially require more trucks to deliver the same amount of freight. Time to charge, you know, ideally you're looking at a 30-minute window or less, because drivers have under federal law to take a 30-minute rest break at least every 8 hours. And then they have an overnight rest break that's required for a much longer period of time. And then two, I think of the biggest issues to be worked out, one is inoperable charging stations. And that is that today there is no standardization in terms of what heavy duty charging stations will look like. So I liken this to kind of if you have an iPhone and you're using one charger, and if you have an Android, you're using another charger, and if you have a newer Android, you have a different charger. And so that is something that the industry really has to work out to make sure that charging stations all use interoperable capability. And then lastly, and perhaps most significantly for the long haul segment of the industry, is there are tremendous truck parking shortages across the country. Right now, we have about 300,000 spaces for over 3 million truck drivers. If you've ever driven past any of the rest areas or truck stops at night, you will see trucks parked along the shoulder all the way along the roadway. And so how we build out that infrastructure where drivers can park overnight and charge overnight if they adopt or as they adopt this technology, I think is a really important challenge that we need to overcome. And then my last slide, there's a great organization called the North American Council on Freight Efficiency that I think does some of the best work on electrification in the commercial sectors. Very, very strong research and really understanding where the industry is today and where it needs to get. And they've presented, I think, probably a pretty realistic timeline that right now, you know, we do hear a lot about trucks that will be coming available readily in the near future over the next 1 to 2 years. But that technology still has a lot of unknown challenges. We are entering, I think, over the next 10 years where a lot of solutions will become available, where we will start to get real world data and the like. And then over the next 20 years where it will become much more robust and commonplace, we will start to see all of those challenges I previously mentioned ideally addressed and readily adopted within the industry. So with that, I will just stop there. And I can add one comment also. I had another video I didn't show for time, but if any of you are looking at maybe what an electric truck on the road looks like, that is truly autonomous, no even space for a driver. If you simply Google Volvo Vera, V-E-R-A, you will see some fascinating videos there around that they are incorporating in Sweden right now already. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to go next to the utilities just because all of this is connected, and then we'll go with questions at the very end. So for the utilities, we have two. We have Charles Washington, Government Affairs for BG&E, and Ivan Lanier. Charles, do you want to start? I'm not sure how the two of you have decided to work out.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chairman Frazier-Hidalgo, Chairman Barve, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Charles Washington. I'm here on behalf of BGE, and we really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this conversation. and to discuss our role in facilitating a transition to electric vehicles and driving sustainability in our service territory by providing personalized solutions to our customers, preparing our infrastructure to ensure reliable service, and supporting our communities and government leaders as a trusted partner. I'm joined today by my colleague, Devesh Gupta, BGE's Director of Strategy, Utility of the Future. Devesh's team is responsible for work in our strategy related to electric vehicles, and he will deliver the substance of our presentation today. So I'll turn it over to you, Devesh.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm just going to take a few minutes here to update you on our utility programs and give you an example of one of the utilities in Maryland and what we're up to with the commission-approved programs. So each of the utilities in Maryland has a similar program, probably scaled down given that we're the largest utility across central Maryland. We launched our program in July 1st of 2019. That was based on Maryland Commission order that came out in January of that year. Here's some of the stats in terms of what we're allowed to do under the program in order to help promote electrification of transportation. And just to give you a snapshot as to how we're doing against this, you look at the residential rebates, by the end of the year, I think we'll have close to 600 of those 1,000 rebates out the door or in process back to customers. Those are $300 rebates to customers for engaging in smart charging, level 2 smart charging at home. Those rates have really ticked up in terms of the subscription to that. So we do expect to be fully through all 1,000 rebates very early on in 2021. I have a non-residential program for multi-unit dwellings as well to try to encourage that. There's also the time of use rate, actually, I'll speak to first. The EV only time of use rate is one of the first of its kind in the country. It's actually allowing us to bill customers a time of use rate only for their electric vehicle charging without having to set a second meter at their home. So it's significantly less expensive. Instead, we're leveraging the metering in their smart charger at home or the telematics from their vehicles, if they're a Tesla driver in particular. So the idea being that we can get the data in terms of when they're charging and how much they're charging, either from their smart charger or from their Tesla telematics, and bill them against that usage a special rate in order to try to encourage them to charge their vehicles in off-peak hours. Then you talk about our infrastructure in terms of our public charging network. We're being allocated 500 charging stations to install in and around central Maryland, particularly focused on communities where the private charging companies aren't going. And we've had a lot of success in that to date. By the end of the year this year, we hope to have almost 100 chargers in the ground and operational. That number, I got to fudge that a little bit because they may be constructed but awaiting final energizing. But we're a significant way through those chargers as well. We hope to, I think we have another 150 or so that have been sited. The sites have been identified and are awaiting either design or some stage of construction. Those chargers have to be located on local or state public grounds, but for public use 24/7. So we are certainly partnering with agencies like MDOT and some of the universities around the state, as well as local libraries, county governments, et cetera, to site those chargers.
Hey, I'm running a Zoom right now, so I can't.
Couple of notes real quickly on some things that are outside of our EV Smart program. We did apply for and received approval for some DOE funding for a couple of programs. One is going to be an advanced managed charging program that we're working on with the Pepco Holdings companies to try out some more advanced versions rather than just the time of use rate. What does it look like when we're managing charging on a particular feeder of our system so that the feeder doesn't get overloaded, things like that. In addition, and this is a really interesting one for us, we are implementing an EV rideshare program. The idea being that we want to introduce 100 electric vehicles focused on rideshare in the Baltimore and greater Baltimore region all the way throughout our territory, with a particular focus on limited income communities as well as communities of color around our territory. The idea being that we're looking to put charging infrastructure in those communities that would support rideshare, and those rideshares would be able to provide clean, affordable point-to-point transportation for customers that maybe don't own their own vehicles and rely on rideshare or public transportation.
We've got a brand new website, or relatively brand new at this point, to provide education materials, comparison materials for customers at bge.com/electric vehicles. A lot more information there. Certainly welcome your questions after this as well. But I know that our Pepco Holdings team is also going to be addressing some different aspects of electrification. Charles?
I think that's an opportunity for me to jump in. So Davish, thanks for that great presentations and handing over the mic. I should say good morning. We're still in a good morning. Good morning, Chairman Barve, and also Subcommittee Chair Frazier-Hidalgo. Thank you for letting us be a part of this very important briefing. As you can see, there's coordination amongst the Exelon companies. We have the same PowerPoint slides, or we're on the same PowerPoint deck. But I have the honor of representing Pepco Holdings, Inc., specifically Pepco Maryland, and also the Maryland Power Light in terms of talking about some of our efforts regarding electrification. I have the honor of introducing David Schatz, who's Pepco Holdings, Inc., Director of Strategy for Utility of the Future. And Dave, if you're on, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Great, thanks, Ivan. And why don't we switch to the next slide? Thanks. So one of the benefits of being the last presenter of the day is that I get to take in all of the common themes throughout the presentations and try to weave it all together if I can. In addition to the EV Smart programs that Devesh mentioned, that Pepco is also taking part in and launching in its own jurisdictions, I want to comment actually on what's coming next. The medium and heavy duty fleet electrification, which a lot of other presenters have commented on. And really, this is going to be a focus of Pepco's in the coming year. As you've heard from many of the presenters today, if 2020 is the year of mass electrification of the light duty sector, I think that 2021 is really going to be focused on the medium and heavy duty fleet side. We have the Maryland MOU, which was mentioned earlier today. And in order to accommodate a lot of the growth and in sales that we're going to see in the coming years, Pepco's really focused on three main roles in making sure that we can support the deployment and adoption of electric buses, trucks, and other fleets. First, we want to be that trusted advisor. When we look at some of the themes that some of the other presenters mentioned, it's that the grid is going to be a necessary component of all of this electrification. And so making sure that we work with our customers to inform them of what grid implications there are and make sure that we can accommodate every single kind of deployment that there is. There's all sorts of designs, as were mentioned, catenary systems, en-route systems, in-depot systems. For every single kind of fleet, there is a different kind of design. We want to be that advisor to help our customers to leverage these technologies and to go about the site and permitting processes, accelerating where we can. The second is trying to promote that lower total cost of ownership that, again, was mentioned in previous presentations. There were a couple of mentions of the rates that utilities can offer. This is something that we're really focused on. We've been in discussions at the commission already around certain rate designs that might better promote and, again, accelerate or catalyze the deployment of electric vehicles, but specifically around the fleet segment. And thirdly, in developing all of these new fleets and accommodating all of the electrification among these fleets, we have to recognize that there are a bunch of different kinds of fleets out there. It is not one monolithic fleet. There are school buses, trucks, heavy duty, last mile, rideshare. You could even consider a fleet, Ubers and Lyfts and the transportation network companies. All of these have different fleet management systems and different schedules. There are a lot of different solutions that we can put forward that will help to accommodate, and I'm sorry I dropped for a second there, that will help to accommodate and balance out the kind of electrification that we'll see. And so, I'm thinking of different solutions like power sharing, where you'll have a bank of EV charging stations accommodating a bus depot, and you'll be able to look at different buses and look at their schedules. One is leaving at 6 a.m., another leaving at 10 a.m., another at 5 p.m. And also look at their battery state of charge at the same time and say, this bus is leaving sooner than the other. We should direct more of our charge at the whole site to that one bus. These are the kinds of solutions that we're looking at right now and that we can assist our fleet managers in also seeking. And so, you know, there is a wide range of utility roles that we can play, from trusted advisor to infrastructure provider to kind of solutions shepherd, I'll call it, that we are prepared to take on as we see more and more electrification. I do want to focus on one quick example of the way this entire ecosystem can work that we're actually pursuing in Maryland right now. If you could go to the next slide, Ivan, or whoever's driving. Thanks. So we do have a pilot project that's just been approved by the Maryland Public Service Commission for placing batteries alongside an electric bus depot in Montgomery County. And this is really kind of the full suite of different kinds of innovative projects that you can have on a single site. You have upwards of 70 electric buses that will be deployed, they project, by 2026 at this bus depot. You have on-site solar canopies that are planned to be able to power those electric buses and contribute to the charging that takes place there. You have new charging infrastructure going in to serve all of these buses in this one location. And you also have batteries that we are going to be putting in, Pepco is going to be putting in at this location, in order to both contribute to the charging that takes place on the site, help to shave the peaks of electricity that are associated with that charging, so that we have a more balanced grid, more better power quality, and also serve a resilience benefit to the grid itself. So you see that electrification is not just raw power, and there's a lot of it going on these sites. It has the potential to serve as a great benefit, something that benefits all customers as we look to balance out the grid and create better efficiencies and sustainable outcomes for every single customer. So with that, I will end my presentation, and I'm happy to support any questions. Thanks very much.
And Mr. Chairman, sorry, just one quick moment of personal privilege. I guess I'll
You've cut out.
All right, Charles, didn't hear anything you just said.
Yeah, you dropped off completely.
So we'll get back to Charles when he unfreezes. In the meantime, Ivan and everybody, thank you so much. Do we have some questions? And I don't know who's driving, but can you give up your
just
do we have any questions? Charles, you look like you're moving again. Did you have something you want to say? You completely disappeared for a while.
It appears my internet is unstable. I said something. What I did was I thanked this committee for your leadership on the legislation that led to the pilot program Dave just discussed, and will be the genesis of several battery storage pilots around the state. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Duncan from Howland Electric, or Louis Campion, or any of our presenters on utilities? I think it's important to understand as we transition to a cleaner trend. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Chairman Bartlett.
I think Jen has a question.
Oh, Jen.
I had a question. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I had a question about the school buses, and Duncan, you might have mentioned this about the infrastructure needed. Is it anticipated that, and I also didn't catch whether you're already doing this in places, but is it anticipated this would be infrastructure all in one place? I know in Howard County, a lot of times the bus drivers bring their buses home with them. How does that work, or is that not part of the same, would that not be part of the same model?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've found that the most efficient way is to locate the infrastructure wherever the bus spends the night. Fit in with the way the transportation director dispatches and manages the fleet today. Having said that, scale does matter. Doing one large infrastructure build out at an existing bus depot that has a couple hundred buses is far more cost efficient, and in the near term is going to likely be the most cost efficient way to sort of start this transition. And when you look across the state, there are certainly some examples of buses that go home, but the majority of the buses do come back to a depot at night, and so that's the recommended place to start from a cost standpoint.
So that's the preferred way, but you can work with counties where they go home.
Absolutely, yes. Okay. It's all about designing the infrastructure with an eye towards meeting the duty cycle, making sure reliability is incredibly high, and then obviously cost is something that you care about as well. So charging stations can be put at people's homes. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's not entirely out of the question.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on school buses? Or
I'll get to Ross. I might, if I could just address a couple of points there, just to touch on something that Duncan mentioned too. In terms of local charging, one of the things we're trying to do with the utilities to provide a little more flexibility, particularly in these transitional years for fleet operators, including potentially school bus fleets, is providing a discount on our fast charging at our public network for fleet operators, a 25% discount if you operate 5 or more electric vehicles that are titled in the state of Maryland. That's something that can provide that local charging for somebody who's taking a bus home, for instance, at a more affordable cost without having put infrastructure at their home. The second thing I'll mention is that we're working with Howard County, utilizing VW funds to start trying out what does electric school bus and electric school bus infrastructure look like. So Howard County will be working with their contractor to purchase a bus to serve students, and we'll be putting in infrastructure at the bus depot there in order to support that as a central place to start trying out infrastructure to support electric school buses.
Great, thank you.
Great. Okay. Any conversation, any questions on school buses, electrification? Any questions for Louis Campion on platooning or trucking? Thank you, Louis. I didn't get a chance to say thank you, but it's pretty cool to watch all those trucks. And I was on that Volvo release a couple of weeks ago, and to see Volvo coming out with these trucks is pretty cool. They're manufacturing them now. So it's not a question of when, it's a question of when they'll actually hit the road, which is going to be in the next couple of months.
Thanks very much.
And then on the utility side, I thought it was important to bring in the utility folks, because as we transition to this cleaner and less polluting way of transporting goods, services, and people, whether it's school buses or trucks or anything else, I think it's important to make sure that we make the appropriate changes in policy to ensure that we can generate clean electricity so that we can complete this cycle to make sure that it's all clean all the way around. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we have the utilities on the call. They are working on a lot of other things as well. So again, for the speakers, please put your information in the chat to ensure that people can reach out to you, because I know people may want to. And then with that, the only other last thing I wanted to say is, again, I mentioned EVADC, which is a local nonprofit in the area that really promotes the electrification and electric vehicles. And these men and women are a bunch of wonks, and they know just about anything you want to know on electric vehicles. So you have them, you got them in your presentation materials. Please reach out to them as well. Feel free to reach out to them, and they will answer any questions that you have about electrification. And a big thank you to all of our members, to all of our speakers, to my chair for allowing us to do this. I can't thank everybody enough. It's been great. I know it's gone long. It could go a lot longer, but Thank you. Thank you. Chairman Barbe, did you want to have any closing statements?
Only to thank you and the members of the committee and all the presenters. This has been very useful to me and I think to the entire committee. And we look forward to meeting you virtually again when session begins. So have a happy, safe holiday.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Wear your masks.
Thank you.